G'day fellas. In this video, we're going to be talking about Sweden in team games. There's a little bit of controversy at the top of the ladder about the role of Sweden in team games and whether they are really overpowered or whether they're not. But in this video, I'm going to demonstrate why Sweden are overpowered in team games. So traditionally, the meta in team games has opted towards second age fighting, but as players get greedier and greedier and people are better at fighting against early aggression, naturally, people will develop strategies that are even more greedy. And so the strategy that I'm doing is a strategy that I've not featured before on this channel. I featured it in another video with the Battle Brothers, and it is a Swedish fast industrial. The reason why it's so incredibly strong is because it takes advantage of the opponent's desire to play a greedy game. So the enemy team is playing Japan, Inca, and Spain, and we're playing British, Sweden, and Sioux. So the people that we're playing against are quite high ranked. So at the moment, Kanisi is number 1 on the 1v1 ranked ladder. H, also known as Hazza, he is ranked number 2 on the ladder. And I'm not sure how to pronounce the third player's name, but his name is Tit. He's from France. I don't think there's anything sexual about his name. And he is also an incredibly good player. And so the players we're up against here, they're the highest caliber of players. And so speaking more about the meta and the way that it's developed, as people get better at defending against rushes, naturally people are less inclined to rush. They're less inclined to play aggressive because they know that their enemy is more likely to be able to defend it. So what that means is that as a result, people play more greedy. They say, okay, well, I know my enemy isn't going to rush. I can play greedy. And even if they do rush, I can defend it. And then what happens is you have both sides saying, all right, well, I know that my enemy isn't going to rush, so I can play greedy. And so what happens is that a meta forms. So that's an expectation of what's going to happen in a game. It begins to form. And what happens is that more greedy civilizations begin to move towards the top of the strength in the meta. So right now, the top tier civilizations, in my opinion, for team games are civilizations like Japan, civilizations like the Brits, civilizations such as Sweden. These civilizations are able to pull off incredibly greedy booms, and then they're able to leverage that for a strong early to mid-game power. And that's what I'm going to be doing in this video. So the idea is that we're going to be shipping blueberries, we're going to be aging up, and we're going to be spamming our torps on all of the mines that we've got. We've fortunately scouted 5 extra mines, so that gives us a lot of freedom with what we want to be doing. I picked up a huge treasure here, which is 300 wood, which is going to enable me to get a massive head start on my torps and my torp production, and it's going to push my economy into overdrive. Once I age up, I'm transitioning everybody over from food onto wood. I'm sending single villagers out to herd each of the hunts onto the coin mines. I'm not too fussed about my own herds in my base. As long as I've just got one, that's all I really need, because for the rest of the game, I'm very rarely going to be using hunts, as my torps are going to be doing all my food gathering for at least the next 12.5 minutes. Once it gets to around the 15-minute mark, I'll be heavily on wood, and if I need to transition into a more food-heavy build, then I've got no problem going on to mills, because I'm going to be making sure I get all my wood upgrades quite early. So because of the enemy's composition, we're unsure about how exactly they're going to play. We scout this settler here as well, but to me it just indicates that they're probably going to be playing defensively, simply through their civilization choices. Spain will most likely be going for some form of fast fortress. The Inca player is most likely going to be doing a house boom, and Japan is probably going to be doing the same. So our strategy, and this is a strategy that we've been developing in team game now for a couple of weeks, is that our Lakota player, so that's Braden, he is going to be putting out early aggression on the enemy. And with that early aggression, he's going to be buying us time. And in the meantime, Chopper and I are both going to be doing as heavy booms as possible. I'm also going to be adding Carolians, just because I was unsure about the state of the game and as to whether they were going to be playing early aggression or whether they were going to be playing early economy. And so despite that, we're still able to hit all of our timings just because of that early 300 wood treasure that we picked up. So the Rax is going down. We're not doing this with our 700 wood. We're doing this with our wood that we've chopped. So this is quite an early Rax for Sweden. Normally you'd be putting the Rax down with the 700 wood. And I'm just making an effort to scout out the trade lines, because I know that the better players are, naturally, the more likely they're going to start taking trade lines. And so I make it my goal in the early game to at least obtain some form of control or map control over the trade lines and any early shrines. Putting up this wall now, I'm deleting the pillars on this wall so that the build time is reduced, as well as the wood cost as well. Once there's 4 torps on each coin mine, I move the settler over and position it onto a new coin mine. So my muskets or my Carolians are still remaining in base. I'm unsure about the state of the game, but I decide that it's important to push out and begin putting some pressure on the map. I see that the enemies picked up a second trading post as well. So it's a game where they look like they might be doing some form of economic play. So with this strategy, you don't have to actually rush industrial. You simply have to get there before your torps run out. That is the key thing. So your torps, once you've shipped ironworks, are going to take 12.5 minutes to exhaust a coin mine if there's 4 torps on it. So that gives you a window until roughly 17 to 18 minutes to get to the industrial age, which is typically quite a fast industrial age up. So I'm going to be rushing industrial just because the pressure that I am receiving is very minimal, and my ally Braden, he's putting out a huge amount of pressure on the map, and it means that I can relax. So the reason why Sweden is overpowered in team games is because for their 4th age politician, they've got the engineer, which provides 2 falconets. Then they've also got 2 heavy cannons as a shipment. And in addition to that, they've got a card, which is 2 culverin and 2 falconets. So what I'm going to be aiming to do, now I can be doing this at 12 minutes, I can do this at 13 minutes, I can do this at 19 minutes. The point is that it takes the enemy by surprise, and that when the enemy does go to counter you, what's going to happen is you're going to have culverins in advance, so that when they bring out their 1 or their 2 culverins, you're going to be a step ahead of the game. And it's going to mean that you can take significant control of the map because you've got culverin pressure, you have artillery pressure, and you're going to have a huge mass of muskets. So now we're moving over into transition. We're aging up to the fortress age. Keep in mind, we've managed to get 10 Carolians out, and we're still aging up to the 3rd age with max torps at, before 9 minutes. So this is a pretty strong game that I'm having at the moment. It's mainly all because of that 300 wood treasure that I got quite early. And so upon age up, I would normally be sending 1,000 wood. That 1,000 wood is going to allow me to build infrastructure. So we're going to be dropping down 2 extra barracks. We're going to be dropping down an arsenal, and that arsenal is going to be providing us the ability to research important upgrades such as Gunner's Quadrant for our artillery and military drummers for our infantry. So Gunner's Quadrant is what is going to provide line of sight to our artillery. It's important that we have line of sight so that we can see where the enemy culverin are, so that we can position appropriately before they can take their shots at us. Then military drummer allows us, where we make mistakes in our positioning, to position our Carolians better so that we can cover our cannons from the enemy units, because it's very common that the enemy will attempt to try and attack the units or attack your cannons with some form of melee units. And so now gathering the 1,000 wood, we've aged up and we're dropping down the market. So with that market, we're going to be picking up our wood upgrades. And so now we see some action towards the east of the map. So the Spanish player is applying some pressure with Rodoleros. I don't think he realizes the strength of the Carolian, especially in melee combat, because they do have that melee resistance, even though Rodoleros have got melee resistance as well. But Carolians are typically doing range damage, so it means that we're able to effectively snipe the Rodoleros and have quite an effective trade. And so now the spam begins. We're already floating more than 2,500 resources, but that's not a problem. We're going to be spending it quick smart, dropping down our arsenal to get our upgrades, and we're beginning our market research. And so our enemy is only aging up to the fortress age right now, and we're about to hit industrial. And it's not even 11 minutes yet, and we've still been able to put out pressure on the map nice and early. So now that we age up, we're shipping the 2 factories. And the reason why we're shipping factories first instead of heavy cannons. In 1v1, I'd normally be shipping heavy cannons, but in team games, I'm shipping my factories first, because my factories are going to be put straight onto heavy cannons once they've finished the heavy cannon research. And from that, I'm going to have a constant influx of heavy cannons coming in. And so receiving a bit more pressure now from the Incan player, just with some jungle bowmen. And now our military drummer upgrade begins. And we're now pushing out with our 2 falconets. So we don't have to wait for our heavy cannons to push out. We're able to take early map control with our falconets. Just because of the size of the map, we don't really need to be worried about enemy Culverin coming out this early. And it's unlikely that the enemy is going to respond to us with Culverin for just having 2 falconets. You're more likely to see the enemy go Culverin if you've got 3 falconets, because that indicates that you're probably going to be making a lot more falconets, so they need to do something about it, or if you've got heavy cannons. And so researching our guard upgrade now for our Corollians. So shortly after, we're going to be sending Svi Lifeguard, which is going to change the resistance of our Corollians from melee into ranged. And so with Svi Lifeguard, we're being a little bit preemptive here. We can suspect from the enemy's composition that they're most likely going to be having the Japanese player go Ashi and Yumi, and Jungle Bowman will be coming out from the Incan player. And the Spanish player will probably be doing a mix of Lancers as well as Rodoleros. And despite that, I'm still confident that Svi Lifeguard is going to be the best choice, because the Spanish player will likely mix skirmishers as well as the Rodoleros and the Lancers. And so overall, I think that a range resist is going to be a lot stronger than a melee resist in the late game. So now with the Falconets, we're able to begin taking back map control. This is map control that we've lost as a result of doing our fast industrial, but now we're able to take that back. We're able to apply pressure. You can see the enemy's having a little bit of trouble with what we're putting down. They're putting up an artillery foundry just to the left of the town center as well, so highly likely that they're going to be looking to make some falconets of their own, or getting a culverin or 2 out. At the same time, we've got Hazza, who is raiding Chopper's base. So Hazza is playing Inca, and he's got some spearmen just running around. And so I would say that Tit's probably mismicroing a little bit here, just because he's losing his lancers quite wastefully to all the Corollians. They just seem to melt almost. And Braden is successfully defending from the Rodoleros behind. And our 2 falconets are doing work. We do eventually lose them, but at what cost? The cost, unfortunately, to the enemy is quite high. And now the heavy cannons begin to roll. So we're shipping 2 heavy cannons from the home city. We've already got our other heavy cannons that are being created at the moment, and they'll be in very shortly. So we're going to have quite a large artillery mass that's going to continue building up over the beginning of this game and heading into the mid-game. And so now, because the enemy's lost position on the front line, it means that we can take down this artillery foundry without any real risk of anything popping out, because it's likely that the enemy just would have cancelled them, just simply on the basis that they've lost control at the front. And so our 2 heavy cannons are now rolling in to help out with our falconet. And we've got 2 heavy cannons about to spawn from our factories. Keep in mind, this is before 15 minutes. And we're also shipping our 2 falconets and 2 culverin. So at this stage, we're going to be having around 9 pieces of artillery. And this is still quite early in the game. And so this is why I'm positing that Sweden is incredibly strong in team games. I would even argue overpowered, especially because we're moving towards this greed meta. This greed meta is happening in both 1 versus 1 and in team games, I'm noticing. And it appears that most of the civilizations that people are choosing are orientated more so towards booming rather than towards rushing. And now the artillery mass really begins to build. We've got the 3 artillery pieces at the front. We've got 6 behind them coming up. And these are incredibly expensive pieces of artillery. And Sweden has got access to some crazy strong shipments. So the 2 falconets and 2 culverin especially, it's got to be my favorite shipment in the entire game. It just creates... it's such a versatile shipment. And what it does is it enables you to proactively counter the enemy. And so the game currently is being played on two separate fronts. We've got the front on the west of the map, which is being fought between Chopper on British and Braden on Lakota. And they're fighting against Hazza and Kanisi. And at the moment, I'm fighting against both Hazza and Tit. But Hazza doesn't really have much of a presence over here. So it means that I'm able to take Tit out and really just really put him out of the game. We get rid of his TC. We don't really do a lot of damage other than destroying his base. We don't get a significant amount of villages. We don't steal his resource crates. But what we do is we solidify our position over on the east of the map. Just because of the running of units that Hazza was doing earlier and trying to target the factories, I become immediately aware that I need to wall these factories because he's going to be coming back for these, very likely that he's going to be coming back for these factories. And so now my macro's gone a little bit off. We've reached the 17-minute mark. I built up quite a high amount of wood as well as coin, and so I decided it's time to drop down some town centers and get into action. I also dropping down a mill as well. Ideally, I like to leave my hunts for my torps. And so now we are moving on to the next base. And so the next base coming up is Hazza's base. And so we spot a fair few villages here and successfully take them out. And beginning to push in with quite a bit of artillery. I would argue that's a very formidable amount of artillery. Some Harakas come in and try and hit the heavy cannons, but unfortunately at the north they're unsuccessful. And so now I've got Braden coming in with me as well, and pushing in, so he's going to be providing further support. And ideally what we want to happen is for our cannons to clear out all the buildings, and then we want to try and provoke them into a 3v2 fight. And this is going to enable us to hopefully have a victory here. And so what it means is that we need to position really carefully, making sure, because if our cannons are within range of buildings, because there's so many cannons, it's very difficult to micro all of them successfully for each shot. So what it means is that we need to take out the buildings, otherwise they're going to naturally default back to the buildings, and it's not a good thing. Because it means they're not firing at units, they're firing at the building, and that's not something that we want happening. And so now I'm maxed out. I've just missed 2 batches of heavy cannons, so it's probably a good idea at this point that I switch off heavy cannons. It's 19 minutes and I've hit that maximum population. And so missing those 2 heavy cannons really does hurt. I would have really been loving to have those. But now we see a battle beginning to break out. So Braden's picked up a lot of the flaming arrows, and the heavy cannons are able to begin taking shots on the enemy infantry. We've got 2 heavy cannons that are set up towards the north, which are taking on the Japanese infantry, and it's an incredibly difficult position for the enemy to begin pushing into. Even though they've got quite a significant mass, just because there's so many cannons means it's very difficult for them to deal with it. So now we've got some light cannons coming out from the enemy. Light cannons are incredibly formidable. They're what I was scared of most happening, and it did happen. I mismicroed. I lost 2 heavy cannons to some Rodoleros, and my cannons continue to pack up, so we're trying to chase. There's just so much going on at the moment that it really becomes difficult to focus. I've got Rodoleros attacking my cannons, and so now I'm somewhat pinched in a position where I'm being attacked from multiple angles. There's a lot going on, and I've overextended myself. I've lost Braden. I don't know where Braden is, and so it means that any potential culverin or flaming arrows or light cannons, I'm going to have to deal with them myself. And as a result, it means that I lose all of my artillery, and I've just got to try and do my best to get out of here with the remaining Carolians that I've got. So now we fast forward a little bit. So moving forward to the towards the 24-minute mark, and our opponent begins to push in. We've got both the Inca as well as the Spanish player over here, and our walls that we placed earlier are going to enable us to leverage the power of our heavy cannons, and it means that we're going to be moving towards an artillery war. So here you can see the opponent moving forward with the light cannons, attempting to snipe off one of our heavy cannons, but not being able to do so. And now the culverin pop. The culverin are what are going to push back the enemy here, because our heavy cannons are now going to be able to focus on the enemy troops. So the Culverin taking out the first light cannon, the second light cannon, and our heavy cannons are now able to move into position, and the enemy just trying to get away with those last 2 Culverins before they lose them. And so we successfully hold off the enemy at this position, but on this front we may be winning, but on the left front, the western front, we are unfortunately losing. So Kanesi's doing a wonderful job over there. He's got a beautiful mass of Yuumi as well as Ashi, and he's pushing in against Braden and against Chopper. And so we've somewhat got 2v1s. It's a 2v1 on each side of the map. It's interesting how this map plays out, but it was definitely a very enjoyable game. And now moving forward again, we begin to push out of our walls, and our primary concern here is the Culverins, so just sniping out Culverins before they can really do any damage. But we really don't have a lot of artillery at this point. We've got 1 heavy cannon, and so it means that the jungle bowmen are just able to take them out. And our Culverins really aren't going to be doing a lot. So in this position, just simply because Kanesi's pushed in quite well, we say good game. But even though we've lost the game, I'm still willing to say that because of the power spike that Sweden can experience towards the early industrial age, that in team games especially, they're incredibly strong. I would even go to the point to say that they're overpowered just because of the power of their boom. In greedy metas like this one, Sweden is incredibly strong because you're able to punish your opponent, because if they choose to go greedy, you can go greedier. And there's nothing that stops you from going up to the 3rd age or to the 4th age and then just powering through, shipping your factories, heavy cannons to the front line. And so here we see Hazza saying, "What is that, Civ?" Obviously talking about Sweden and just the stupid cannon mass that we had. I think it was about 15 minutes and there was something ridiculous like 12 cannons. So Hazza obviously a little bit confused with the strength of Sweden. So if there's anybody that really thinks that Sweden isn't strong in team games, I would definitely provide this as a piece of evidence swaying them the other way. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and been able to take something away from it. Other than that, it was a very fun game, so good game to both Tit, Kanesi, and to Hazza. You guys played a tremendous game. Thank you very much for watching.